So this next panel is something that's actually is really important for me because it brings my new world together with my old world. So Killer Mike has been a friend over the past 3 years, and we've, my wife and I have been talking about me being more vulnerable and me sharing stuff, and Mike is one of the people that I feel I can share with because he's non-judgmental and he's experienced a lot. So it's really been meaningful to get to know Killer Mike. I remember we went to Apple and listened to his music, right before his last album, dropped, and he won the 3 Grammys for, and you could hear the truth and authenticity in his voice. So hopefully he brings that energy to this panel. Jerome Hill is one of my brother's dearest friends. And, we grew up together. I'm 5 years older than those guys, but, really critically important for me to have Mike and Jerome have this conversation. And then we have, Dr. Brooms, who is, responsible for the faculty, kind of the faculty chair here at Morehouse. And again, as I've aged, right, I wasn't always the best friend of teachers growing up, especially in high school. But as I've aged and I have college-age kids, my son is applying to schools right now. We're waiting to hear back from Morehouse, so fingers crossed, all the good energy into the universe. But, having Dr. Brooms here and understanding that he's leading the men that are leading the men, right? So he's the person who is kind of helping to guide these, these professors who are then in turn, and again, it was magic today, right, to be in the Crown Forum. It was pure magic, and I felt a different way after, kind of sitting in that session and hearing, being part of the songs. Like I said, I got choked up. I'm not a Morehouse alum at all. We used to come over here on Fridays and hang out. But there were some really good brothers, including Dr. Bowman, who were my era. So it's a magical panel, and I'm glad to be kind of here today. So I'm going to start standing up, and we're going to wait for a chair. It's good to see you, man. Everything good? For sure. Okay. Yep. Yeah. So Mike, I'm going to start with you, man, because one thing I've discovered about you, and again, you hear it through the music, but in conversation with you, you are one of the more thoughtful individuals, and kind of very quick. With words, and you just spit gems all the time. But I really want you to kind of talk about your experience, especially we're having this community conversation around your entrepreneurial endeavors, and the barbershop in particular. Let's talk about the barbershop and what that means to me and you and the entire culture.
I think I know. So I grew up walking to a barbershop, me and my autistic uncle, a mile away from our house in Dixie Hills, right past the apartments, past Lincoln Memorial Cemetery. If you grew up on the west side, Simpson Road is where I grew up going. And the thing about this, it was owned by a man named Mr. Bell and Mr. Wilder. They were deacons in the church. They were upstanding citizens outside their shop. And then inside the shop, you got to see the whole human being. You got a chance to hear the dirty jokes. You got a chance to hear what they really thought about politicians and from the local to the world stage. And that made me want to own a barbershop simply because the barbershop was the country club for working class men. It was a place that, because I went to a different barbershop than my grandfather, a lot of the lessons that my grandfather would try to impart on me, you're a little resistant to your day-to-day parent. My grandparents, my day-to-day parents. You go in the barbershop, you hear the barbers and the customers, and you're like, oh shit, my grandpa got a point. Maybe I shouldn't spend every dollar. Maybe I should save a quarter out of every dollar. So the barbershop for me was a place where the traditional morals and values my grandparents gave me were reinforced because they were owned by people who were local business people who cared about the community. The barbershop for me was an economic place because I saw money being exchanged. I saw the black dollar going around. It also was a place where I saw that the community could organize around. When it was time to get people voted in office, when it was time to find people who were unsavory in the neighborhood, the barbershop was the place that people came and made their pitch. If it was somebody that felt unsafe to the kids, hey, watch out for this guy. He'd be on the corner after they get out of, and the barbers at that time would walk out in everybody's whole corner. So for me, it served the duality in that I saw economics happening there. So I knew I wanted to own my own. But I also saw social responsibility in that when people were tired, people were beat up, people shut down. I've seen barbershops close and say, hey, we're going to take an hour to be with this customer till the police or medical people get here. So for me, it served as a haven for working class men, and it also served as the first example for me to really see business and commerce happening in a way that I wanted to apply in my own life. So hence I ended up owning barbershops and opening a barbershop products line.
So, yeah, that's fantastic. And I want to come back to the barbershop and especially that socioeconomic, I'll say crutch, that is provided. But, I want to talk to Jerome because barbershops, necessarily are grassroots, right? You don't kind of go into a barbershop without, kind of really feeling a kinship. It just, it's really hard to walk into a barbershop where you don't know anybody, right? So,
Yeah.
So, go.
The barbershops I went to, and to be very honest, the African-American community is pretty welcoming as a community, if you come in respectfully. So if you walk in a barbershop where you don't know nobody, somebody's going to say, hey, what's up? How you doing? Who you looking for?
But that's going to be the cat that can't cut hair, right? Because he's trying to get you in the chair.
He can't cut hair for shit, but he's going to speak to you. But usually other people get acclimated and you're spoken to because the black community is not what they show you on the news. It's not all treachery and divisiveness. So there's a will and a want to make sure that, first of all, you know where you're at. You sure you're in the right place? And after you get over there, you sure you're in the right place? People tend to be very welcoming because we don't want people not in our community. We appreciate them spending money there. Again, the barbershop is one of the first places where the young boys hear, hey, man, y'all standing in front of the store, man. Y'all messing it up. People don't want to go to the store now. So young boys learn to get out of the way when the old lady come up, hold the door for her. So for me, the barbershop has been a place where, it could be a scary endeavor going in a new barbershop. But with that said, usually you find somebody who's friendly, can't cut as well. You become their customer. They learn how to become a big barber, fucking you up a couple months,
That's what I'm talking about. So, but again, that's super grassroots, right?
Yes.
Somebody touching your head, like.
Yes.
And Jerome, so you're dealing with this in Florida, right? And as we talked, a state that isn't always aligned with the majority of Black America, right? But you're down there representing us, and I'm curious. And you're dealing with policies, right? You're dealing with the same problem that Mike wants to solve, but you're dealing with from a policy perspective. I'd love for you to talk about what you think from the policy perspective is really important to be kind of addressing for us.
Policy is everything. You can't start to do anything in life without putting something or indoctrinating a policy that is going to go ahead and take care of the whole. So at the Florida Council of the Social Status of Black Men and Boys, particularly after Trayvon Martin was murdered, we had an understanding that we needed to go ahead and put individuals who are figureheads of all the major departments in the state of Florida, in addition to our senators and our representatives, and then try to come up with a thought process and take a look at the existing laws that exist. How do we change that and make them better? Which ones do not exist? Where do they exist in the United States? So we can start making that type of change. Mike, of course, Killer Mike makes up, the majority of taking a look at barbershops. When we take a look at social determinants of health, that's one of the places that we have to look at because there's a sense of community there and relationship. When we take a look at in barbershops in particular, what we need to go ahead and understand is, and many times, people come to culture. That's exactly why all of you are here, because of culture here. You don't run to clipboards. You don't run to pamphlets. You run to culture. And we got to do a better job in explaining that while we have individuals and thought figures like on this stage to go ahead and introduce to other individuals that this is how we can go ahead and manipulate the system and have it work for us.
Yep, and that's a very great, kind of segue into, again,
Research Institute.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and this is the best and brightest, like, make no mistakes about it, that come out of here. And again, I work with Corey every day. I talk to Corey every single day, right? But, there are others that I know that have come out of this institution that are leaders of men, and you guys are clearly doing it right, even though you're not kind of standing pounding your chest. So I'm curious, like, how do we take what Morehouse is doing and, kind of spread the wealth, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think Brother Mike and Brother Jerome kind of lay out a groundwork, if you will. So, there's multiple things that you do in a higher education institution. One is obviously you teach. And the more important thing that we do at a place like Morehouse is you're not just teaching subjects, right? Of course, I'm professor in Africana Studies and History, and Brother Shipman Young is professor in chemistry. Like, we're teaching subjects, but the most important thing you do in teaching is people, right? And so we look at these brothers as brothers who are going to be men, right? They're in their pathways to become men. And we empower, I don't want to use the word, I don't want to say we empower them. We help them realize their sense of empowerment so that they can go into communities, whether they want to start a business, engage in media, engage in the legal field, et cetera, want to engage in policy and help them understand, like, this is how you can make a difference. And so much of what you see in this 159-year history of Morehouse College is trying to make men of consequence and change, right? Our communities are going to be better because we're going back to them, right? Or if I'm not from, like, for instance, I'm not from Atlanta, I'm from Chicago, but I'm going to represent Atlanta in the way I would represent Chicago, right? And so there's a love walk and a love ethic that I'm going to engage in that says we are builders, not destroyers. And so from there, it's going to be, similar to what Brother Mike has done in his work, and I don't know all of Brother Jerome's work, but like, we're going to build teams. And so then we're going to map that out to other men that we engage with, boys that we engage with, but also with women and girls. And so then we become that chain reaction of we can link together. I might not own a barbershop, but we can have that conversation, et cetera, et cetera. So we're trying to teach guys here about how do you build social relationships, right? Because if I want to own a business, your business ain't gonna go nowhere if you don't have customers, right? So we try to teach them that social acumen as well as the business acumen. But regardless of what it is we're trying to do, we're trying to create positive change in the communities that we engage in.
Right, and Mike, we've had this conversation, quite a bit. So in addition to the barbershop, you have a restaurant.
Yep.
Right, and I'd love for you to tell the story about the restaurant. I don't know how much deep you want to get, right? But it's actually entertaining story. But it was a pillar of the community, right?
Yeah.
And you saved it.
T.I. and I own a restaurant a couple miles from here called Bankhead Seafood, and we bought it from Miss Helen Harden. She had the restaurant 50 years on Bankhead, what's now Donnelly Howe. And she was just a character, man. I loved her to death. If you're from the West Side, you know that it is a all-black enclave, essentially. It was top to bottom black. The poorest of the poorest to the richest of the richest lived there together. The paupers lived there. The Russell family, McKinley's, and King families lived there. So everybody was kind of together. There was a woman who had a seafood restaurant where it was kind of like an in-and-out spot. You just went and got fish on Fridays, and her name was Helen Harden. T.I. had bought to start development on 143 units of old Kmart. And I was like, man, I ain't have $1 million cash to buy, but if you ever come across another deal, let's go half on something. He called me a couple weeks later, like, they're selling Bankhead Seafood. The lady say she'll sell us everything. She'll sell us the land, the recipe, the building, everything. And I said, well, let's do it. And we split half. And that's when I learned how shrewd a businesswoman she was, because we paid her before we got the recipes. And I was like, damn, you good. She was like, I know, pay up, sucker. And after a little more, we got the recipes too. But that woman, we had spent our young adulthood and kiddom kind of running in front of her business, trying to be dope boys, trying to be players, trying to do everything. I entered Morehouse and left a year later. So I passed this lady my whole life. So to buy it, I was buying more than a business. Restaurants essentially only make 20 cents on the dollar. You only make money if you sell very cheap food or very expensive food. Everything in the middle usually closes. So we got in the business of selling fish boxes and fish sandwiches, not because I thought it was going to dramatically change our financial lives. As me and Tip got pretty good jobs, me and T.I. We sing and dance for a living. But for me, there was a need to keep a business in that community that was of that community, by that community, for that community. There was a need to have a business there that employed people of that community and kept the food and the traditions and the culture of that community alive. A half a mile up the street, they were building $500,000 townhouses, $500,000 houses and going up around. And there's a loss of neighborhood. A lot of the legacy residents there, if it had not been for former Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, who's currently running for governor, if it had not been for her putting a moratorium on taxes, a lot of people would have gotten pushed out, legacy restaurants. So T.I. and I understood that there was a need to keep the legacy of this business alive. There's a need for employment that people can walk to. There was a need for engagement in terms of a food desert where you could go get a hearty meal that wasn't just a place that took your money through a window, gave you something and sent you along. You could sit down in our restaurant. It's the first restaurant on Bankhead Highway with a rooftop dining. So it was important for me and Tip to do. We like making money, but more than the money, the legacy of this, the carrying on the tradition that this woman had carried on for 50 years was important. It's important that young men and women from this neighborhood see that T.I. and I have not left. We're still in the neighborhood. We're not actively trapping in front of nobody's store. We are not no dope boys or players no more. We're just some middle-class, average black dads who run businesses. We own properties in the neighborhood we grew up in. We're actively involved in the high school we went to. So for me, I'm just simply doing what both my grandparents told me you're supposed to do. You're supposed to reinvest in your own community. When it was time to buy my daughter a house, I bought her a house 2 miles from Bankhead Seafood. And I told her, hey, man, I'm going to need you to report on the weekends, make sure the money's straight. So you're only 2 miles from the job. Go take care of it. My son, who's in here with me today, spent some time working there. So for me, it's just simply doing what my grandparents said, what I'm supposed to do.
And you know, it's actually interesting because you're supposed to do it, and there are positive effects, but there are also very negative effects when people don't have that community, right? Or they get involved in the wrong community. And Jerome, you spent a lot of time, you know, in law enforcement before kind of going down to Florida, right? Most notably, I think, in Baltimore, right? So we're all familiar with Baltimore because of popular culture, right, in The Wire. But, you know, when people don't have that community, they don't have the benefit of a Morehouse education or mentorship. And, you know, one of Mike's neighbors is the provost over at Georgia Tech, a good friend of mine, right? You know, so yeah, just imagine kind of that supportive community. When you don't have that, what does that look like? And not just to the individual that may be going through the system, but, you know, their family, their friends. You know, what's the impact?
Yeah, for those individuals, you face isolation because you have no type of support from your family or anybody that will help you become upward bound in terms of elevating your social status. And oftentimes, I would have to deal with individuals who would take upon their circumstances all the ideology of negativity, and they tried to make something out of nothing, but it was really a parallel to all types of negative stereotypes. So those individuals, if they earn the right to go ahead and be placed in silver handcuffs, you know, it begins their journey into their future maybe not sustaining in a way that they can go ahead and help themselves, and God forbid if they even have a family.
Well, let me ask this, because again, the road that when they put those silver, you know, kind of bracelets on you, it's clear when it doesn't, you know, kind of it ends in tragedy, right? What are the cases when it doesn't? Like, you know, again, it's supposed to be a correctional system, right? You know, we're supposed to rehabilitate people in a lot of cases. Have you seen cases where that's been, you know, kind of the case, or is it, you know, once you're in it, I mean, it's pretty much a lost cause?
Let me tell you this, there are many individuals who have gone through that particular system and have elevated themselves. Don't let the media ever tell you that these are a dime a dozen. There is more than a little bit. And they come out to become truckers, they come out to do all types of things. A lot of them are coming into the media space now, so they can go ahead and let you know that I made it from this position. And we need each and every one of them, because they give you the roadmap on what they had to go through as products of their environment and how they were able to elevate that. You always need a roadmap. You may not know where you're going all the time, but if you have the roadmap and somebody can teach you and lead you to another place, you go. And so we see a lot of that, more so than what you think.
No, that's good to hear.
On a local level, there's a woman, Chief Judge Asha Jackson, out in DeKalb County. Asha was a longtime friend of mine since we were 11. She started something called the Pinnacle Program, where depending on the charge you get, she gives you a year to reform and gives you some advocacy things that you can do. And after that year, your record is expunged. You get to move forward if you complete those tasks. And if not, you don't. The governor was so impressed by it, he took a woman out of Fulton County Juvenile Court named Miss Ali and emulated a similar program statewide for the Georgia Defense Attorney. So there are good programs coming out, just to agree with you.
Yeah, great point, because there's a lot of these programs out here, and they're done in all states all across the United States. We have to do a better job, and this comes back to your barbershops, where we need to go ahead and put information to these individuals that are cutting hair and make them the information vessels,
Amen.
as opposed to individuals just talking about what's going on the weekend.
Yeah.
They have the ability, they have the skill. Why? Because they deal with people all the time. And what do? That's where the information highway is. So we can go ahead and fundamentally change this, but we have to go ahead and have conversations like this and let it be honest, and we have to go ahead and be uncomfortable talking about certain subjects so they can go ahead and grab everything they can.
Amen.
And I was going to say, that just speaks to the power of community, right? And so we're thinking about like black men's health, wellness, et cetera, mind, body, spirit. There are ways in which we got to have spaces where we can be restored, picked up, right? We would desire that to be in family ranks. Sometimes, many times, that's not always the case in terms of biological family, so it becomes fictive kin. So this is going to be my brother Mike, right? And so we develop brotherhood and relationships with other men, but other people within the community who become other fathers, other mothers, right? Grandmothers. I remember growing up, we had, my buddies had parents who looked out for us in different ways. And so, right next door to us was Mr. and Miss Brown. And so we got home from school before my parents did. And Mr. and Miss Brown was looking out the door, right? And so we can think about that as like, man, they watching us. It was like, no, they want to make sure we're okay, right? And so I just think about the point that you're making about the importance of sharing information. We got to think about that from a communal aspect. And to both of what the brother said, we can't wait on other people to tell us what we need, right? And so then how do we take the information that we have and spread it into particular spaces within our community, sometimes as businesses, sometimes as organizations, sometimes as clubs, sometimes as agencies. And like we're hitting people with information in multiple spaces that they enter so that then it's like, man, I keep hearing about this program. I need to go and check it out.
It's actually, I'm concerned now. I feel like we're in crisis because what we've talked about during COVID was a lot of people they never returned to barbershops, right? A lot of people still go in the West Coast, not as much, right? Probably here because there's more culture. The institution of the church is eroding. Paul's talked about him going every Sunday, right? That was mandatory. That's not the case for a lot of people, right? So all these cultural institutions and community institutions are eroding. I'm curious, like, what, especially on the research front, how do we emulate what you guys are doing here? Because clearly it's powerful, right? Clearly it's working, but not everyone can afford a Morehouse education. Not everyone is going to benefit from, the mentorship and the stewardship and the fellowship of Morehouse. So
yeah, I'm going to pick up on what Brother Mike and Brother Jerome mentioned. There's things that are happening in the community. We just don't always hear about them. And so,
well, how do we amplify it?
I think we've seen it in place. So again, I'm from Chicago. There's things where we see, fathers going on strolls with their children in a stroller, right? And so that's a way to make sure that we're together and checking on each other because, again, if we're talking about parenting, if we're talking about just even living our lives, we can't do so as isolation, right? And so what can we do? So a number of things that we can do that are, really take no money. We all got cell phones for the most part. And so there are ways in which we can be in communication with each other, checking in on each other to make sure, hey, Brother Mike, just checking in on you, ain't talked to you in a minute, just wanted to see how you're doing. We can tap into already established spaces. So even as we've seen less church going, as you've mentioned, less folks going to barbershops, there's still a lot of people going to churches and still a lot of people going to barbershops. There are some people who are doing church digitally, right, or virtually. And so we got to do some shifts in some ways to tap into those demographics of folks if folks in this age bracket, what are the type of habits that they have and ways in which they engage? And we just got to shift how we're trying to engage them because we keep trying to do the way we did it when we were growing up and they're not doing that. On the one hand, we might say it's not working, it's just they're doing it differently, right? And so I think that the last point I'll make, because I know we're getting close to time, is collaborate. Brother Mike talked about this with the business front. We got to collaborate and partner, right? So it's not good enough for me to go and do my thing, Brother Mike to go and do his thing, Brother Jerome to go and do his thing. It's, how do we put our heads together and see where's some overlap and how do we step into the gaps or even refer people? Let's get some information and refer people out. So I think it's going to take kind of an entrepreneurial spirit, if you will, on the one hand, but a lot of collaboration and partnership, and then we just got to be intentional.
Well, and Mike, if you can talk about Alonzo Herndon and kind of his journey, right? I know one of your favorite topics, but for me, I remember, right, being a 5-year-old kid and going into the barbershop and then passing the hat, right, and that manifests itself because what they realized back then that I think right now we're so, everyone wants to live in the, in the suburbs, we don't give back. We don't even talk to our neighbors a lot of times.
Yeah.
But they realize the impact of someone passing away, not being able to bury them, what type of, and again, we talked about it in an earlier panel, what type of generational impact that has.
We got to tighten up as old people. Anybody ever heard that before? Old people say, you got to tighten up. I mean, your shit then got a little loose, man. Victor Hill, the old cleared out of tight Clay County. I see you out there, Victor. You could feel how you want to feel about him. But boy, he ran a tight ship. One of my partners did 9 months in the jail. He came home, he said, I ain't got to go to goddamn prison. If jail was like that, I'm going to tighten up. That man now works at the airport, takes great care of his family. 2 brothers. Another brother I know ended up getting out, joining the nation. No one liked being locked up. You didn't like being indoctrinated those silver cuffs. But boy, if you a smart man, it'll make you tighten up. And I say that about Morehouse and Morris Brown and Clark and Spelman. We're so close in proximity to young black children who go to schools that are named for black educators and emancipators. Booker T. Washington, Frederick Douglass, former president of Morehouse, Benjamin E. Mays, school named for him. We need to tighten up our connections off this campus with those schools. I tell black kids, when I go to predominantly white institutions, they say, well, what could we do? I say you could tighten up and make sure you go mentor a little kid who live close. He might not be going to Florida State. He might want to go to FAMU, but it's your mission to tutor him to make sure he can do it because you were given one of the best educations and you have that. Now you can impart that. We can tighten up by making sure that kids at Washington High School see the campus of Morehouse and know that Washington High School is where Dr. King went before he landed at Morehouse, is where Lena Horne's parents sent her to be educated, and all up and down the East Coast, they used to send black kids before the AUC, they sent them to Washington High School. We need to tighten up at Washington High School to say, hey, not only did Mr. Edward Johnson, who just turned 94 and is a mentor of mine who was at Booker T, who was at Benjamin E. Mays, went to Booker T, and he had to learn trades and academic skills there. We need to tighten up. We need to be like, this is the 30th anniversary of School Days. Spike Lee was here a few days ago. Remember the scene School Days when they was arguing with Samuel L. Jackson when he had the Jerry curl right up here at the Kentucky Fried Chicken? I remember having to walk up on some of my partners who was in Du Bois Hall with me. They was finna get robbed, and me having to tell the homies from over here like, hey, nah, man, you can't do that. They students, bro. Don't do that. And I wasn't a hero of saving the day. I just talked to the people I already knew like, hey, man, you can't do that to them. They gonna be here 4 years. Don't do that to them. And I was able a few times to broker interaction between kids I knew from being freshmen at Morehouse together and kids who were off campus that bettered the kids off campus because they got a chance to see past the tip of their nose, past the blight of their street, past the doubt that they were given. We have an opportunity as historically black colleges and universities, and in particular Atlanta University Center, to inspire other children to do it the Atlanta way, to inspire one another, to help one another, to take the Atlanta mentality of clapping for black people when I see them achieve, of celebrating it, because I know of my partner, I've been with him since kindergarten. I know how slow he is. If he could get in there, I know I could get in there too. We both going to Georgia State this year. But I know that because I'm inspired by those next to me. So what I would encourage Morehouse students to do is to find a student off campus, whether it's a young cousin or a friend or someone you meet, and encourage them. Don't give them money, just encourage them. And what I would encourage professors to do is to set up staged environments where you can take your students to these schools in the APS that are named for black people, or get the students to this campus to see that, to open up their mind to the possibility of.
I think that's a great way to end. Really, I appreciate the multifaceted, multi-perspective topic of, the conversation that we had here, and a lot to be done. But I think to your point, tighten up and each one teach one. You know?
And with that, what you were saying, it does take a village. He was understating a little bit. His friend from Georgia Tech, one of them ended up being the mayor of Atlanta, and he went to Benjamin E. Mays, which is my rival high school. So I believe in good rivalries. You don't have Morehouse without Howard and Howard without Morehouse. You don't have Booker T. Washington without Frederick Douglass in terms of rivalries. And the other one is Raheem Biyah, who is now professor of technology over there. Raheem grew up three doors from me, and Raheem's mother's door was always open. Yep. We didn't have to go all the way to Martin Luther King and played video games standing in the store. Raheem's mother let us play right there in his bedroom. And because she saw her neighborhood as a village, she parented not only Raheem, but a lot of other little nappy-head boys running through there. And because of her, not only is he a super duper dope professor over at Georgia Tech, you now have a killer Mike in front of you and many other young men that are from our neighborhood. So it takes a village, and we all can tighten up some. So thank y'all for having me today.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you.